All right, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to DPP, Daily Power Parsha, Friday, March 19th. We are going to explore the last few readings of the Torah portion of Vayikra, which is the opening in the book of Leviticus. So we've talked about the Ola offering, which is the burnt offering. We talked about the Shlomim offering, which is the peace offering. So the Ola offering is completely burnt from the altar. The peace offering is enjoyed by the one who's bringing the offering, the Kohen, as well as the altar, as well as God. Different types of carbonot, different types of offerings, different rules and regs, but all about bringing a pleasing aroma, if you will, before God, which means nachas, giving Hashem nachas. The Rebbe has a beautiful explanation of that, of what does it mean to give Hashem nachas. Essentially, it's that Hashem asked, Hashem said, this is what I'd like. And we do it, even though we might say, what, you want us to do this? Why do you want that? Real love, true love is, I don't know why you want it. I don't know why you like it. But if you like it, no problem. You want a carbon, that's it. We'll do it. You want an offering? I'll give you an offering. So this is the true nachas that we can give to Hashem. Now, let's jump into some new conversations. And here we go. Let me pull this up. Okay, can you see that? The Torah reading. Yes? Okay, let me go to the right reading. Fifth reading. Because we missed, oh wow, look at that. The Haggadah is right there on the top. It is a nice Haggadah. I'm actually keen on printing it myself. Okay, this is Vayikra, fifth reading. Today we're going to do 5, 6, and 7. The old triple header. Let's begin. Chapter 4 of Leviticus, verse number 1. And the Lord spoke to Moses, saying, speak to the children of Israel, saying, if a person sins unintentionally by committing one of all of the commandments of the Lord, which may not be committed, and he commits part of one of them. So what happens if a person sins unintentionally? Yes, there is an app for that. And by app, I mean there is an offering for that. There is a carbon, a sacrifice, an offering that is brought when a person commits an unintentional sin. And this is really important because one might ask, if I did it unintentionally, so then why do I need to bring atonement? Why do I need to bring an atonement offering? I didn't mean it. I didn't do it on purpose. And so I'll give you the mystical explanation. Everything we do by accident is coming from some sort of subconscious drive or energy. In other words, if it would be impossible for me to do it, I wouldn't have done it. The fact that I did it even unintentionally means somewhere deep inside, there is a tendency, proclivity, etc., toward this thing. So therefore, the atonement is not on the action because the action was unintentional. The atonement offering is for the subconscious drive that's pushing it, that pushed me even even unwittingly, even without my intention, into that state. So it's a much more subtle type of work that needs to be done. Look, on a very basic level, if I did something wrong and I meant to do something wrong and it happens, so I could feel bad about it. Like, I really did something wrong. I did something bad. I feel bad that I did something bad. But if I didn't do it on purpose, I could justify myself and say, well, I didn't mean to do it, and let myself off the hook, and then never do tshuva, never actually fix it because it wasn't my fault. So it's the unintentional stuff that actually could be the most trippy. By trippy, I mean it could trip us up the most. I don't mean trippy in the traditional sense. I mean it could be the most dangerous. Hence the need for atonement, the need for the offering. All right, let's jump back into our text. 1 second. Okay. Good. Verse number 3. So now the Torah gets into different individuals that might have committed that unintentional sin. If the anointed Kohen sins, that means like the either the high priest or the anointed Kohen Mashiach is the one who led the people to war in times of war. Either way, if the anointed Kohen sins, bringing guilt to the people, right? Because if the Kohen is sinning, then it's not a good thing. Then he shall bring for his sin which he has committed an unblemished young bull as a sin offering to the Lord. So again, these are sin offerings when somebody does something wrong unintentionally. And this specific context is the anointed Kohen who is doing this sin and who is bringing this offering. And he shall bring the bull to the entrance of the tent of meeting before the Lord. He shall lean his hand forcefully upon the bull's head and slaughter the bull before the Lord. And the anointed Kohen shall take from the bull's blood and bring it into the tent of meeting. And the Kohen shall dip his finger into the blood and sprinkle some of the blood 7 times before the Lord, before the dividing curtain of the sanctuary. And the Kohen shall place some of the blood on the horns of the incense altar, the corners that protrude up, the corners of the incense altar. That's the golden altar inside the building, which is in the tent of meeting. Again, that covered edifice before the Lord. And he shall pour all the blood of the bull onto the base of the altar used for burnt offerings. This is the outer copper altar, which is at the entrance of the tent of meeting. So again, some of the blood shall be placed on the horns of the incense altar, the golden inner altar, and the rest of the blood is poured onto the base of the altar that's outside the building, but in the courtyard still, used for the burnt offerings, which is at the entrance, and it was outside of the tent of meeting. And all the fat of the sin offering, I feel like at this point we have a good handle on the temple and what it looked like, right? Or the Mishkan and what it looked like. So hopefully all that made sense. And all the fat of the sin offering bull, he shall separate from it, the fat covering the innards, the fat, and all the fat that's on the innards, and the 2 kidneys, along with the fat that's on them, which is on the flanks, and the diaphragm with the liver, along with the kidneys, he shall remove it. Just as was separated from the bull sacrifice as a peace offering, the Kohen shall then cause them, these items, the fats and the kidneys, the liver, the diaphragm, to go up in smoke on the altar used for burnt offerings. So that part is burnt on the altar. He shall then take the bull's skin and all its flesh, along with its head, and along with its legs, its inner and its waste matter. He shall take out the entire bull to a clean place outside the camp, namely to the ash depository. He shall burn it in fire on wood, thus it shall be burnt in the ash depository. And if the entire, so that's all the sin offering, the inadvertent sin offering of the Kohen HaMashiach, the anointed Kohen. Now, what happens if the entire community of Israel errs? So the whole nation makes a mistake because a matter was hidden from the eyes of the congregation. From the eyes of the congregation means that the Bet Din, the actual court of Jewish law, ruled in an erroneous fashion. Imagine that. Imagine the high Jewish court makes a ruling that's inaccurate, and everybody follows it thinking that it's the law, and it turns out they got it wrong, and they realize later, facepalm, but all the people acted in the wrong way because a matter was hidden from the eyes of the congregation. That's a euphemism for basically saying the court got it wrong. They didn't intend to, but they just messed up. And the people commit one of the commandments of the Lord, which may not be committed, incurring guilt. So what do you do then? So when the sin which had been committed becomes known, right? Because if they made a mistake and no one ever found out about it, well, then we don't even have this conversation. What we're talking about here is, of course, the court ruled, the people followed, and then the court realizes, whoops. So when the matter becomes known, then the congregation as a whole shall bring a young bull as a sin offering. They shall bring it before the tent of meeting. Doesn't mean everybody needs to bring it, but one on behalf of the entire community. The elders of the community shall lean their hands forcefully upon the bull's head before the Lord, and one shall slaughter the bull before the Lord. Again, same basic structure here. The anointed Kohen shall bring some of the bull's blood into the tent of meeting. The Kohen shall dip his finger from the blood and sprinkle it 7 times before the Lord, before the dividing curtain. All right, a little bit of a twist over there. And he shall then place some of the blood on the horns of the altar, again, the inner golden altar that is before the Lord in the tent of meeting. And then he shall pour all the blood, the remainder, into the base of the altar, the outer altar used for burnt offerings, which is at the entrance to the tent of meeting outside. And he shall separate all its fat from it and cause it to go up in smoke on the altar. He shall do to the bull just as he did to the bull the sin offering. Thus he shall do to it. Thus the Kohen shall make atonement for them, the community, and they will be forgiven. So essentially, we talked about 2 sin offerings, the anointed Kohen and the community, pretty much the same formula, give or take. And he shall take the bull outside the camp and burn it, just as he burnt the first bull, as we mentioned a few moments ago with the anointed Kohen. It is a sin offering for the congregation. All right, that's all the first 2 categories. Category number 3, or scenario number 3. If a leader of Israel sins, So now it's not the priest, it's not the community, it's the Nasi, it's the leader of the people. Sins and intentionally and unintentionally commits one of all the commandments of the Lord, which may not be committed, incurring guilt. If his sin that he has committed is made known to him, then he shall bring his offering, an unblemished male goat, and he shall lean his hand forcibly upon that goat's head and slaughter in the place where he slaughters burnt offerings before the Lord. It is a sin offering. It's going to follow the same formula. I want to get back to this opening verse of this third scenario, but I'm going to get there soon. Let's just go through it, and then I'll get back to that, to verse 22. The Kohen shall take some of the blood of the sin offering with his finger, place it on the horns of the altar, used for burnt offerings, the outer altar. And he shall pour its blood onto the base of the altar used for burnt offerings. So both the placement of the blood and the pouring of the blood, in this case, are on the outer altar. Just a little bit of a plot twist over there. He shall cause all its fat to go up in smoke on the altar, just like the fat of the peace offering. Thus the Kohen shall make atonement for his sin, and he will be forgiven. Okay, but I want to get back to this preamble, if you will, of this third scenario. Again, what are the three scenarios? One, the anointed priest. Two, the entire community based on an erroneous ruling from the court of law, from the Bet Din, from the Sanhedrin, from the Jewish court. And number three, the leader. But if you look in the Hebrew is Asher Nasi Yechta. Asher doesn't only mean if, it could also mean when. Asher Nasi Yechta would therefore mean when the leader sins. And what's the message? If you're in a position of leadership, good luck getting it right all the time. Right? It's almost impossible if you're in a high stakes position, right? It's pretty much impossible that you're not going to do something that is mistaken. Mistakes happen. It comes with leadership. Leadership comes with making mistakes. But the point is, when a mistake is made known to him, then he fixes it up, right? That's the mark of a leader. When you become aware of the mistake, you correct. A not good leader or a corrupt leader is someone who, when the mistake is known to them, doubles down or triples down and says, no, it wasn't a mistake, right? This is exactly the way it was supposed to be. It's not a leader. That's a shakran. That's a liar. It's a different type of situation. So what the Torah is telling us is that a leader comes with challenging territory, right? Asher yasin yechta, that a leader will sin. In other words, it's almost inevitable that it's going to happen. Doesn't mean sin egregiously, hopefully not. It's unintentional. But listen, it is what it is. First of all of us, right, do things that we don't intend to do. It happens all the time. But the point is, even a person, and especially a person in a leadership position, is even more susceptible to this. That's one thing. Another point is, Asher can also be related to the word Ashrei, like the famous Jewish prayer, Ashrei Yoshev Esecha, which could be translated as not if or that, but happy. Happy. Happy, Rashi says, happy is a nation whose leader, when they sin, they cop up to it. Are you with me on what I just said? Ashrei, a nation, a generation is lucky and happy and fortunate if when their leader messes up, they take ownership over it. Let me show you the Rashi. It's a really beautiful Rashi on it, just so you could see it inside. Okay, here. Asher is an expression reminiscent of the dictum stated with the word ashrei, fortunate. Namely, here we go. You ready? Fortunate is the generation whose leader does not hold himself too high, but rather gives attention to bring an atonement offering for his unintentional sin. How much more so will he experience remorse for the sin he has committed willfully? In other words, if even for the mistakes, by the way, let me just, before I'm finishing that sentence, you know what it means to bring an offering? It means you have the leader or the king comes to the temple, schlepping an animal. You're not going to avoid the tabloids. This is like front page news. This is live footage, right? This is live at the temple. I'm Rabbi Ari reporting from the leader's sin offering. Wonder what he did wrong, right? So we're talking about something that's open and obvious for all to see. So the point is, if the leader is able and willing to do this, even for an unintentional sin where he could have justified it, maybe, He'll surely do it with intentional, with real things that he did wrong. And that's a fortunate generation whose leader is so transparent and honest and moral and righteous, etc. That's a good thing. So indeed, we should have good leaders. We should be good leaders, etc. All right, that's fifth reading. Let's go on to number 6. Okay, 2 more. 1 down, 2 to go. Not that it's like 1 down, but we're 1 in. Let's go. Chapter 4 of Leviticus, verse 27. If one person of the people of the land commits a sin unintentionally, now it's private individuals. Before we talked about the anointed priest, the court of Jewish law, and the leader. Well, what about the citizen? Here we go. If one person of the people of the land, in other words, a citizen, commits a sin unintentionally by his committing one of the commandments of the Lord, which may not be committed and incurring guilt. So you did something you shouldn't have done by accident, unintentionally. If his sin that he committed is made known to him, he shall bring a sacrifice. And what is that? An unblemished female goat. I think before it was a male goat for the leader, but unblemished female goat for his sin that he has committed. And he shall lean his hand forcefully upon the head of the sin offering, and he shall slaughter the sin offering in the place of the burnt offering. And the Kohen shall take some of its blood with his finger, place it in the horns of the altar used for burnt offerings, the outer altar. And then he shall pour all of its remaining blood again at that same altar at the base of the altar. He shall remove all its fat, just as the fat was removed from the peace offering. The Kohen shall then cause it to go up in smoke on the altar, a pleasing fragrance to the Lord. Thus the Kohen shall make atonement for him, and he will be forgiven. How beautiful, by the way, is it that there was a ritual where if somebody did something that was wrong, they didn't mean to do it, they did unintentionally, there was a process by which there could be a sense of alleviating that sort of heaviness of the misdeed. It's actually a beautiful thing. Okay, let's continue. And if he brings a sheep, not a goat, if he brings a sheep for a sin offering, he shall bring an unblemished female sheep. He shall lean his hand forcefully upon the head of the sin offering and slaughter as a sin offering the place where he slaughtered the burnt offering. And the Kohen shall take some of the blood of the sin offering with his finger, placed in the horns of the altar used for burnt offerings, and he shall pour all its blood onto the base of the altar. So again, same process, whether it's a female goat or female sheep. He shall remove all its fat, just as the sheep's fat is removed from the peace offering. The Kohen shall then cause them to go up in smoke on the altar upon the fires of the Lord. Thus the Kohen shall make atonement for him for his sin which he committed, and he will be forgiven. All right, there we go. Now let's continue. New category, new topic, chapter 5. This is other cases of guilt. Other cases of guilt. Before, we talked about sin offering for unintentional sins. Like, I didn't mean to, I messed up, whoops. What do I do? Here's what you do. Bring an animal. Done. And the inner work, right? Chapter 5, different scenario. If a person sins, whereby, here's the nature of it. He accepts an oath, and he is a witness to some matter by seeing or knowing it, yet he does not testify. This guy basically says that I don't know, I didn't see it, I didn't know it, I didn't hear it. He takes an oath, but he lied, right? He did have testimony to share, but he promised that he didn't. So then he shall bear his transgression. That's a mistake, and he's liable for it. He's guilty for that. Or if a person touches anything unclean, whether it is the carcass of an unclean wild animal, or the carcass of an unclean domestic animal, or a carcass of an unclean creeping animal, and it was hidden from him, he incurs guilt. Now, this is talking about if he then went to the temple, or he went to a place that you can't be unclean when you go to. Just the state of uncleanness itself is not a guilt state, but it's what happens afterwards that could lead to some guilt. Or if he touches the uncleanliness of a human with any uncleanliness through which he may become defiled, and it is hidden from him, and later he knows, he has incurred guilt. Or if a person swears, expressing with his lips to do harm or to do good, whatever a man may express in an oath, and it is hidden from him, and later he knows, he is guilty in any one of these cases. These are all cases where you knew, then you forgot, then you realized again. Let me explain. A person realizes that they became unclean, verse 2, and then it was hidden from him, and then he forgot, and he went to the temple in a state of uncleanliness. Are you with me? What happened in the scenario? ritually impure. He knew he was impure. And then, whoops, brain freeze, or no, that's the wrong term. Like, whatever, forgot, went down to the temple, was hanging out. Oh no, what have I done? This is called a guilt offering, not a sin. This is called guilt, not sin. See, we talked before about the sin offering. The sin offering is when a sin was done, but you weren't guilty because you did it unintentionally. You completely did not intend to do it. In this case, these are guilt offerings because the person is guilty. Why? Because you shouldn't have forgot. You shouldn't have forgot. What do you mean you forgot? You should have remembered that you were impure, right? Again, these are all cases where he knew it and then it was hidden from him, i.e. forgot, and then later he remembered. Again, that's incurring guilt. Person takes an oath, verse 4. You took an oath. I promised that I'm going to do such and such. And then you forgot. And then you remembered. Again, he is guilty in any one of these cases. These are cases of not sin, but guilt. And guilt is worse than sin. Why? Let me just explain why. Because sin means there was a sin committed, but I'm not guilty. It was completely unintentional. There, essentially nothing. It wasn't me. It happened. It was unintentional. I'm still going to atone for it, but I'm not guilty. I'm going to atone for the sin, but the association with me is a little bit more vague. In these cases, you knew the testimony and you said you didn't. You knew that you were impure and you showed up at the temple. You forgot. I don't know. Is forgetting a valid? Forgetting is not unintentional. That's not the same category. That's the point. Forgetting is a different category. You should have remembered. So here we go. So it shall be when someone incurs guilt in any one of these cases that he should, number one, confess the sin which he had committed. That's verbal confession. The first step of tshuva, when you're guilty, is verbal confession, verbally saying, I did this, which was wrong. And then he shall bring his guilt offering to the Lord for his sin which he had committed. What's the guilt offering? A female. This is called an asham. I'm going to give you some terms. The last category was chatas. That's a sin offering for unintentional sins. This is asham for guilt, for guilty actions. So the guilt offering is, the asham is a female animal from the flock, either a sheep or a goat for a sin offering. And the Kohen shall make atonement for a sin, but if he cannot afford a sheep, so, all right, we got another option. He shall bring as his guilt offering for that sin that he committed 2 turtle doves or 2 young doves before the Lord, one for sin offering and one for burnt offering. He shall bring them to the Kohen, who shall first offer up that bird which is designated for the sin offering. He shall then cut its head by piercing with his nail opposite the back of the head, but shall not separate it. He shall sprinkle from the blood of the sin offering on the wall of the altar, and the remainder of the blood shall be pressed out onto the base of the altar. It is a sin offering. He shall offer up the second one as a burnt offering. According to the law, thus the Kohen shall make atonement for him for a sin which he had committed, and he shall be forgiven. So again, if a person commits a sin in a guilty fashion, you should have known better. You forgot. Who forgets? You should. You're impure. Don't go to the temple until you go through the process of purification. Why are you showing up? Right? You forgot. Okay, you got to bring your guilt offering. So it's either an animal, a sheep, or a goat, or 2 birds. Either way, there's an atonement offering for the guilt, or guilt offering that brings atonement. But what if he can't even afford the birds? But if he cannot afford even the 2 turtle doves or 2 young doves, then he shall bring as a sacrifice as a third option, right? An animal, a bird, or alternatively, 1/10. He shall bring as a sacrifice for a sin 1/10 of an ephah. Why can't I highlight what I want to highlight? 1/10 of an ephah of fine flour for a sin offering. Certain amount. He shall not pour oil over it, nor shall he place frankincense upon it, for it is a sin offering. Don't make it smell fancy. Don't put makeup on it. Don't make it look too dressed up. It's your guilt offering. It's a sin offering. Take it easy, right? Just bring it in a humble fashion. He shall bring it to the Kohen. The Kohen shall scoop out again the 3-fingered fistful as a reminder, and cause it to go up and smoke on the altar upon the fires of the Lord. It is a sin offering. Thus the Kohen shall make atonement for his sin that he has committed in any of these cases, and he shall be forgiven, and it shall belong to the Kohen like the meal offering. The rest of the flour the Kohen gets to use and keep as a holy offering, so in a holy context, but it still goes to the Kohen. Okay, all of that is called asham, and so we have so far, how many categories in this week's Torah portion? Burnt offering, peace offering, Well, the burnt offering was either from animals, birds, or a meal offering. Then you had the peace offering. Then we had the unintentional sin offering. I may have skipped something. Unintentional sin offering, which we studied earlier today. And then we have now the guilt offering. So at least 4 or 5 categories thus far. Let's continue. And the Lord spoke to Moses saying, verse 14, if a person commits a betrayal and trespasses unintentionally against one of the things sacred to the Lord, he shall bring as his guilt offering to the Lord an unblemished ram from the flock with the value of several shekels in accordance with the shekel of the sanctuary for a guilt offering. And what he has trespassed. This means basically misappropriating holy items for personal use. That's what we're talking about here. It's called trespassing against one of the sacred things. That means using something that's consecrated to the temple for personal purposes or mundane purposes. Okay, that's what we're talking about here. And what he has keep on saying that word. And what he has trespassed against the holy thing, he shall pay. In other words, if he misappropriates some temple item for personal use, so then you got to compensate for that thing. And in addition, he shall add 1/5 of its value to it on top of the original item. So let's say simply he used an animal slated for a sacrifice as a private animal, as a private steak night, right? So then boom, you got to replace the animal and add an extra 1/5 on top of that. And he shall give it to the Kohen. The Kohen shall then make atonement for him through the ram of the guilt offering, and he should be forgiven. So you got to bring an offering, a ram, pay back the value of what was taken, misappropriated, and an extra 1/5. If a person sins and commits one of the commandments of the Lord, which may not be committed, but he does not know, he is guilty and shall bear his transgression. He shall bring an unblemished ram from the flock with the value for a guilt offering to the Kohen. The Kohen shall then make atonement for his unintentional sin, which he had committed and did not know, and he shall be forgiven. It is a guilt offering. He has incurred guilt before the Lord. All right, let's continue. And the Lord spoke to Moses saying, if a person sins, betraying the Lord by falsely denying to his fellow, new category, concerning a deposit. So let's say somebody gives you something to hold. I'm going out of town. I got $1,000 under my pillow. Take the 1,000, watch it for me under your pillow. When I come back from vacation, please give me back the money. Sure. You come back. Hey, can I get my $1,000 back? Don't know what you're talking about. Don't you remember the pillow money, mattress money? I gave it to you. I have no idea. Never happened. Never happened. I gave you $1,000. Never happened. Now what? Right? So now this is somebody who falsely denies to his fellow concerning a deposit or money given in hand or an object taken by robbery or withheld funds from his fellow. In any case where a person is holding on to money or items that belong to someone else, right? Kind of like stealing, right? Sort of, kind of, right? Or if he found a lost article and he denied it and swore falsely regarding any one of these cases whereby a man may sin. So in all these cases, essentially, you have something that belongs to someone else, but you're pretending that it doesn't belong to them, it belongs to you, right? All these cases are the same. Okay, so and you swore falsely about it. You actually took an oath when the person schlepped you into court. You said, I promise that he never gave me the money, or I promise that that's my rare item and I didn't. It doesn't belong to that other fellow. I have no idea what you're talking about. So if that happens, and an oath was taken also. And it shall be when he has sinned and is guilty. In other words, when either he's busted or he cops to it, either way, that he shall return the article which he had robbed, or the funds which he had withheld, or the item which had been deposited with him, or the article which he had found. Any of these cases, essentially, you have to give back the thing that belongs to them, or anything else regarding which he had sworn falsely. He shall pay it with its principal, adding its 1/5 to it. So again, similar to the case before about misappropriation of holy items, this is misappropriation, or I don't know, I guess kind of misappropriation of someone else's stuff, money, item, whatever. So you got to, number one, give it back or pay its value if it's gone. and then add an extra fifth. He shall give it to its rightful owner on the day he repents for his guilt. So it sounds like maybe he got a little pang of guilt and remorse. He's like, actually, remember I promised that, remember I told the court that you never gave me the money. Remember I took an oath in court about that. I've been feeling guilty about it. Here's your money back. Extra fifth, my friend, an extra fifth. That's the penalty, an extra fifth on top of it. And an offering and a sacrifice. He shall then bring after, very important, after he makes it right with the person, he then deals with God. He shall then bring his guilt offering to the Lord. You see, first you have to make it square with the party that God is not going to forgive as long as you're holding on to Yankel's money. Give Yankel his money back, and then we can talk, right? You're still holding on to his stuff. Enough of that. So he shall bring his guilt offering to the Lord, and an unblemished ram from the flock with the same value for a guilt offering to the Kohen, and the Kohen shall make atonement for him before the Lord, and he shall be forgiven for any one of the cases whereby one may commit a sin, incurring guilt through it. That is the Torah portion. So this last little bit is all about, from verse 14 and on, it's our last category. It's essentially cases of, from verse 20 on, this last little bit, are all cases of misappropriation. Well, I should have gone back. I was right before. Okay, the last two cases are misappropriation. Either a person misappropriating funds from the temple, right? So you take holy items and you use it for private use. That's misappropriation. Or somebody gave you something to hold for them and you misappropriate it by taking it for your own benefit and lying about it and denying it. Or you owe somebody and you say, I don't owe you anything. Or you found something that somebody else lost and they came knocking at your door and you're like, nope, I don't have it. Nothing to see here. Gotta go, right? In all these cases, it's misappropriation, i.e. theft on some level, but whatever. I mean, yeah, not downplaying it, just, a unique form of theft. And it's not robbery. It's not like you actually went in with a gun and ripped it out from the person's house. Another way you got it, but you're pretending that you don't have it. In these cases, and then you promised that you didn't and you lied about it. In these cases, you have to do three things. Number one, you got to get it back to that person. Either the thing or the value, the cash amount, whatever it is. You found their rare poodle, and then you took their poodle in, and then you sold their poodle for $1,000. I don't know if that's how much poodles go for, right? And then they're like, did you find my poodle? And you're like, no, I definitely did not find your poodle, and then sell it for $1,000. I would never have done that. And you promise that, and you take an oath about it in court, and then you feel guilty about it, and then you cop to it. So you got to pay the $1,000 or whatever the value, you can't get the poodle, you can get the poodle, but you got to get back at least the money, right? And then add a fifth. So that one thing is the principal, the original cost, the value. Number two is the extra fifth. And number three, an atonement offering, a guilt offering to God for the guilt of what you did wrong. That's the 3-step process. What's important, as I mentioned before, is there's no talking to God until you take care of it on the ground. You cannot say to God, I feel so guilty for stealing that guy's stuff. God's like, did you speak to them yet? Did you make it right? Why are you speaking to me? Like, what are you confessing to me for? Go speak to him or her, make it right, and then talk to me. Then we'll deal with it. But don't jump the gun. This is why our sages tell us that Yom Kippur works as atonement between us and God. So if we did something or didn't do something in our relationship with God, that's what Yom Kippur works for. But between us and somebody else, no prayer from the prayer book is going to work for that. That means that's a conversation. That's a conversation and a relationship that needs to be fixed. That's not a prayer to God. Now, after that's done, right, or at least started, then you can go to God and say, God, I want to confess me harming one of your children. That's another conversation. But you got to make it right with them first. Does that make sense? All right. Which leads us to the answer of the sunflower. Simon Wiesenthal's book. where he writes that he was approached, or he was called in to a dying Nazi's bedside. And the Nazi wanted to confess to his war crimes to a Jew. And he said, please forgive me on behalf of all the atrocities that I've done against your people. And Simon Wiesenthal wrote that he writes that he didn't know what to say to this guy. He essentially just walked out. He didn't know what to answer. So he then posed the question after the Holocaust, after the war, he posed the question to philosophers, religious leaders, and it's a book. I believe it's called The Sunflower. I think it's called The Sunflower. The Wallflower, the Sunflower, something about a flower, by Simon Wiesenthal, where people weigh in. So he writes the beginning, but people are actually weighing in on it and writing. Deborah Lipstadt from Atlanta, right? Deborah Lipstadt, the famous Holocaust professor, et cetera. She's, speaks a lot about the Holocaust and from Emory. So Deborah Lipstadt has one of the responses published in Simon Wiesenthal's book. And she writes very accurately from Torah law that no, Simon Wiesenthal could not forgive this person on behalf of the Jewish people. That doesn't work. Now, if he harmed him, God forbid, he could choose to forgive or not forgive his own pain, his own hurt. But you can't go to somebody else and ask forgiveness for something they didn't do, which is essentially what it is if we show up on Yom Kippur and ask God to forgive us for the money that we ripped off Yankel for. That's going to the wrong party. You're sorry about ripping off Yankel, go to Yankel, make that right. Don't go to God, right? If you harmed Jews, don't go to Simon Wiesenthal, go to the families, go to the grave sites. How do I know who? All right, start at it. You got to start, but that's what needs to be done. Third party is not right, is whether it's another human being or God, or for that matter, nowadays people go to the media, right? Somebody gets busted doing something wrong, and the first thing is a press conference. Honestly, you don't have to ask forgiveness from us. Have you spoken to that person? Have you met with them? Have you reconciled with them? Again, this could be anyone and everyone that needs to do this work, including ourselves. But like the whole idea of a public statement and a this and that or the other, the whole thing is a farce. The question is, did you speak to that person? Have you had one conversation with the person? One conversation. Maybe yes, maybe not. If not, that's what needs to happen. Not a press conference, not a press release, not a statement. What kind of statement? Well, I need to forgive somebody for some. What does that have to do with? I mean, yeah, there's a public confidence in somebody is one thing, but forgiveness is to the party that's aggrieved. And again, getting back to our parsha, because that's really what this is about. The Torah says that if you essentially stole from Yankel, get it back to him, add the fifth, and then bring your atonement to God after that. But first deal with it on the ground. And so let's go into Shabbos with this energy, the energy of it's never too late, always possible to fix, but we got to do the work. That's the bottom line. We got to do the work, put in the effort. And of course, it's a two-way street. And just because we're sincere doesn't always mean the other person is going to be forthcoming and open and whatever. But we got to do what we got to do. We got to do what's right on our end. If we're the party that either intentionally or even unintentionally hurt someone else, we got to make the effort, a lot of effort to make amends and to do what's right. And with that, God certainly does the old Etch-a-Sketch, clean slate, and we're back in business. All right, thanks for joining today and this week for DPP, and I can't wait till next week. Sunday, Kabbalah and Coffee, Monday, DPP, Monday Night Jewelry, very exciting, and the week, Erev Pesach week rolls on. All right, everybody. Oh, and Sunday night.
A question, please.
Yeah, sure.
So I know, on Wednesday night, you spoke about how this book was the first book in Torah study that youngs. So is that, and you said it's the most difficult. So is that the reason that it's the first book, to get into the nitty gritty, where it's just learning the mechanics?
So children, they don't typically study the whole book. They just start and then they go back to the beginning. But there's something about starting at least a little bit of this. And the stated reason is not necessarily because of the difficulty, but because of the purity. Because the other stuff, gets involved. Even this is already getting involved. See, as we go into today's reading, it's already about guilt and sin and negativity. But the opening is pure. It's just a person giving an offering to God. It's a pure,
straightforward. It's straightforward.
But it's also pure. It's a soul. It's a person who wants to give a gift to God. This is the way to do it. Whereas the beginning, you have sin right away. You have floods. You have drama. You have family drama. You have Egyptian drama and Pharaoh and slavery. It gets messy. Now, it's not disparaging the beginning of Torah, but it's just putting it into a context. Children that are pure start with the pure, at least the pure section.
Not the whole book, just you're saying the beginning to give a feel.
Yeah, it will be very difficult to go through the whole book for a child just starting out.
And it goes to the beginning.
Exactly. Yeah. Okay. Now, sometimes some schools will not go all the way back to the beginning. They'll start actually with the story of Avram, with Abraham. So they'll fast forward they'll start Vayikra and then cut out the first little bit and start with Avram and maybe tell the story outside of what happened until then, but inside reading the verses and translating and learning Rashi, starting learning inside may start from the story of Abraham, just because it's our story, but it's also it's a little bit also more straightforward.
I get it. So it's more from a teaching point of view, right.
Exactly.
One more. Can you give me in the chat, maybe yesterday you gave the 2 Hebrew words for the artisan. Why is that heart?
Oh, yeah. So I'm going to write this over here. Chacham lev. Chacham lev. So remember, chachma equals wisdom, and lev equals heart. So what we have here, Chacham Lev, is wise of heart, which is weird because it's are you wise or are you heart, right? Is it brain or heart? Is it intellect or emotion? And the point is, an artist, the point that I tried to say last night is that an artist combines both wisdom and intelligence and skill with emotion, right? There's a lot of emotion. There's that's the power of it, is emotion, but there's also a skill. Anyway, all right. That's it for today. Pleasure. Good to see you guys. Have a wonderful Shabbos. We'll see you soon. Take care.